welcome back to the project again. In this lesson we're going to continue where we left off last week with finishing up the tabulate area calculations for this, and I'll probably start by reversing the tabulate area like we talked about last week, making the crop types the first field and have them be in rows, and then have the areas in the next column over. And then from there we'll make a map probably, and then add the metadata to finish up our data layers. Okay, let's take one more look at this from a different analysis perspective. So as I mentioned last time, I went through and I added the land use classification code names based on the PDF to the document, and I joined them in and exported a new one. So I still have the class code and then I have a name. Which would probably be better as class name now that it's in the land use classes table. So I'm going to try tabulate area, but slightly reverse this. First, I'm going to dissolve on the class code and name fields, and then I'm going to tabulate area in the reverse with the floodplains being the classes and the land use data being the original zone data, and that way I'll get rows with this information and then a column with the values, and that'll make a little more sense and be a little more portable. So let's do a dissolve really quickly, and I'll dissolve on land use with classes, and I'll call it dissolved, and then I'm gonna, as I said, dissolve on these two fields, which means that they'll be in the output, but also any unique combination of those two fields gets dissolved into a single feature. So even though I'm selecting two fields, they are the same. So anytime any class code has one and only one name field, so it's not going to make things too complicated. So I'll click OK and dissolve. Okay, and we now have a new layer, the land use with classes dissolved, where we get just a polygon for each class. So citrus, grapefruit, dates, which we don't even see, olives, and on and on and on. Corn. So now let's use this as our zone data and the floodplain as our class data. Okay, and we'll select our land use with classes dissolved as the zone data, and instead of class code I'm going to select name because that's what I'll get back in the attribute table, so this will give us a nice table. And then in the class data I'll select floodplains, dissolve, and I'll use object ID, that's the only one. And then I'll call it tabulated floodplain agriculture pivoted. And I'll set it to 50 meter cell size this time. It was great last time at 20 meters. It gave us really good resolution. Let's just make it a little faster this time and go for 50 for the demonstration. And see where that takes us. Okay, so we got our table back, and let's take a look at it. And this is more of something that makes sense than what I was looking for. So we have the name of the crop being grown, and we have the area of the crop. So let's do something really quickly here, and I'm going to go to catalog, and let's go to my Scratch database here, and this one was this field here, and I'm going to rename that object ID field, because what it was the object ID of the floodplain layer, but in this case what it represents is the area of the crop. So I'll call it cropped area and apply it to rename it, and that way we have a more useful field here. Now, to bring this all together, we'd probably make some sort of map. And let's go to data view and close the table for now. And I'll zoom to the whole page. And let's take off the boundaries on our layers here and get rid of the ones we're not using. Save it as a new document, agriculture map. Okay, and then let's take off the boundary as I said before, so that just gets drawn a little faster too. Okay, and probably what I'll do is symbolize that data based upon the primary class. So we'll add all values and then apply. And since we dissolved it, we don't have the original class values here. So that's not as useful as it was when we had the main class instead of the subclass. So symbolizing on this isn't super interesting, but let's at least go to properties for all symbols. Again, get rid of the outline so we can see a little more. And it at least gives us a sense for some sort of trends, even though the values aren't currently in groups the same way. But what we can do is select all the ones with the C, and then properties for selected symbols, and give them a color. We'll color those green. And then for the D's, we'll do properties for selected symbols, give those another color. It's a little bright. F, properties for selected symbols, and we can go to blue maybe, and then no outline again. And you'd probably actually, with the land use map, try to choose your colors carefully to match the data at hand. You'd want to make sure that it's going to, as much as possible, imply the land use type it is. So if we were going to do this in reality, we'd want to do something like that. And so, but it looks good for now. And we have broad classifications of crops as one color now. And what I also want to do, if we zoom back out, is add the table that we just created, this table, to our layout. And this isn't something I've shown you before, but if we go to the menu in the table and click Add Table to Layout, we get the table in our layout view. So what we can do is place it up there, and I'll close this. And if we expand the table, we can see the records more. Now, that's not very useful as it is, so since it was taking the sizes of everything from the view we currently had, let's delete that, and then go back into the table, and let's hide the object ID field by turning it off, and let's shrink this to a reasonable width, and shrink this to a reasonable width, and make sure that all the values are seen. Sure. And these ones get cut off, but for now that's okay. And then let's do table add to layout again, and we get a much narrower view of it there that we can run down the side of this. As a summary of the crops. In this case, it's still a little impractical because it's still too big for our data here. So I can't seem to shrink it enough to make everything fit. But if we had a smaller set, or if we had a bigger sheet of paper, we could do this, and then we could move this way and this up here. And we'd probably add a note on the map saying cropped areas are in square meters, or we'd add a new field and convert to square kilometers or something like that. And then last thing on this really simple version of this map. Again, we could spend a lot more time on it, but really the emphasis on this was on the processing side, is we'd take this floodplain layer and maybe we would make it sort of a light bluish down here. And it's still a little distracting. Let's make it even lighter. And turn off its boundaries too. And then we'd add a title and a legend. Okay, so in order to make a sensible legend, let's kind of reverse what we did earlier now. I'm going to go into Field Calculator, and under our Land Use with Classes Dissolve table, I'll go to Add Field, and I'll name it Primary class and make it text, and it only needs to be about 2 characters. And then I'm going to calculate that just like we did earlier in this course by stripping out just the first part of the class code with what we call Python slicing. So what this says is take everything in the class code field up to and including, or up to the first character where there's a 0th character. So take character 0 and not character 1 or anything following. So click OK, and I get the primary class. And I'm doing this because I actually need to symbolize based on that. And if I symbolize on that instead, I can then set up a legend that looks decent. So I'm going to undo some of that work I did with the symbology here. And I'll switch to primary class, add all values, and OK. And now when I go insert a legend, it won't be completely full of crop classes. I won't give the legend a title or any of these other things. And now the legend actually has some meaning to us. So we can close this and we can move our data like this and then switch to the Select Elements tool. Now double click on the legend. And for the land use, I'm not going to show the layer name, and that will turn off this part here. Great. And then go to OK, go to Properties here. We'll turn this off. And then actually, let's rename that to land use type. And then in the legend, we'll turn the layer name back on and turn off the heading, because that will stop showing the field and show the layer name instead. Okay, we'd probably do a lot more with this map. I'm just going to insert a north arrow and a title. Crop cultivation in California floodplains. I'll put it down here too. Move my north arrow down. And then normally we would insert a scale bar and data sources and my name and all of that. But I'm pretty much out of time for this video, so I'm going to cut it off here in terms of the cartography. And the last thing I'm going to want to do though is I should add metadata to my resulting layers. So if I go into our catalog, and actually I'm going to switch to the catalog window. I have trouble bringing up the item description field or the item description tool in ArcMap itself on my computer. And first thing I'm going to do, just to symbolize that this is important, is I'm going to move this to a new geodatabase again, and I'm going to call it results. And that's just a way to clearly see when you're looking in the future, if you've forgotten about the project, what are your project's results? So I'm going to copy this table into there, and any other final layers from this would go in there, and maybe some of the stuff in data could go there too, but data is kind of important working layers, and results is my final layers in my case. And now I'll go to item description and go to edit, and I need to start filling these in. So let's give it a quick title. Crop cultivation in California floodplains, California Central Valley floodplains, and I call it crop, or tags of crops, agriculture, floodplains, things like that, and then give it a summary, tabulated areas of agriculture within floodplains. And then oftentimes I do the rest of my metadata in the description. If you do that, it's fine. The FGDC format that you would have set in the first class is gives you lots of different places to put all this. But the most important thing is to get it all down. So what do we need to put in this case? Think about that for a second. I should put my name. I should put my data sources. So I need to note the National Flood Hazard layer and the DWR, California Department of Water Resources, land use layer. And I'm just going to abbreviate all this so you don't have to watch me type out the metadata for a project that you just watched. And then I'll put processing steps. National Flood Hazard layer was subsetted to exclude 500-year protection or non-flood prone areas. And land use excludes non-agriculture types. Both were subsetted to the Central Valley. As determined by the layer I have. And then I dissolved them and tabulated areas. And this table's the result. So I'd put in a much more detailed version of that. I'd also put I already put my name in, but I'd also put the date this was all done, where exactly those data were retrieved from, and the date that they were retrieved, and anything else. Again, just continuing to put anything that's relevant to this analysis in there. Specific choices I made as to what data is included and excluded are major things to put in there. Those are the things that later on, if you try to reproduce these results, or if somebody asks you, well, how did you get those numbers? You want to be credible by knowing exactly how, and then you can explain the limitations of your results. Okay, I'm going to save it now and leave it there. And that's it for this project. So I realize we skipped a lot, and it's mostly because I didn't want to completely bore you by making you watch me use ArcGIS when I'm not specifically teaching you what I'm doing, and instead I'm teaching you a thought process. But hopefully you gain something from this project in terms of finding data, in terms of pre-processing it, which is something that we're not really doing the rest of the courses because it's time consuming, and a lot of those pre-processing skills come from the other GIS skills we build. Definitely start up some discussion topics about this. See if you have other things you'd like to do with this data, and think about how you process data from start to finish in GIS. Okay, see you next time.